Hey guys, tonight we step into a place you probably never imagined in detail. The kitchen of Olympus. Yes, there is one, or at least there must be one, because how else would the gods enjoy their famous banquets? And right at the center of it stands Hestia, the goddess of the hearth. She is calm, gentle, steady. But tonight, she attempts something even more dangerous than thunderbolts. Cooking for her entire divine family. If you've ever panicked over burnt toast with guests waiting, imagine the same, but multiplied by Zeus, Hera, Apollo, and a few dozen divine egos. Honestly, you might not last the night. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And in the comments, tell me your city and the time right now. Is it midnight in Athens? Early morning in Sydney? Or maybe you're wrapped in a blanket somewhere, eyes half closed, pretending you'll sleep after just one more chapter. I love imagining that. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. The kitchen of Olympus is not glamorous. Forget marble halls. This place is closer to a smoky canteen. Stone walls are darkened by centuries of fire. Bronze pots are dented, spoons warped, air heavy with roasted grain and faintly burnt onions. At the center, Hestia stirs the sacred fire. She is not flashy like Athena or dramatic like Dionysus. Her power is steady, like coals that never die. But tonight, she has set herself a challenge to show that the hearth goddess can cook. Historically, Hestia's role was unusual. She had no great adventures or scandals. Instead, she represented the sacred hearth flame that never went out in Greek homes and temples. Each city kept her fire alive. At meals, she received the first and last sips of wine. Yet ironically, no myths describe her actually preparing food. Some scholars joke that if she had, mythology would read more like kitchen comedy. Tonight, you'll see why. She lowers a bronze cauldron onto the flames. Fire leaps eagerly, less like cooking and more like a volcanic experiment. Oil shimmers inside, flashing like a spinning constellation. Mortals, fear splatters. Here the danger is Zeus frowning at smoke in his eyes. That could literally cause a thunderstorm. The family gathers. Zeus crosses his arms. Hera polishes her sarcasm. Apollo strums his lyre. Artemis sharpens an arrow in case hunting more meat becomes necessary. Hermes? Already stolen 3 rolls of bread. Logistics, he says. You realize this is not just dinner. It's performance, ritual, hierarchy. Hestia knows one burnt flavor might earn her centuries of mockery. Remember, the Trojan War began because one goddess wasn't invited to a feast. Imagine what happens if Zeus receives undercooked stew. Here's a quirky fact. Salt in ancient Greece was expensive, sometimes used like money. Adding a pinch was an investment. That's why offerings to gods were often plain, unseasoned. Food symbolized purity more than flavor. Yet here Hestia is, grinding herbs, trying to create something sacred and edible. Scholars still debate whether gods really needed food. Some insist they lived only on ambrosia and nectar. Others argue feasts mattered to display rank. Who sat where, who ate first, who dared complain. Food was power. Tonight, that power rests in Hestia's ladle. She stirs carefully, as if the cosmos depends on the rhythm of her spoon. The fire crackles, shadows stretch. You lean closer, as if part of this impossible dinner. In that moment, you understand. It isn't only about cooking. For Hestia, it's about proving that the hearth can feed as well as symbolize family. Whether the gods appreciate it is uncertain. But you, standing in the doorway of Olympus's kitchen, already feel history rising in the steam. The meal has barely begun, but already you notice the biggest obstacle: the gods themselves. If you think your family is picky, wait until you sit at the table with immortals. Zeus, king of the skies, claims everything tastes bland unless it carries the sharp sting of lightning. Hera complains about oiliness before a single dish is served. Poseidon, whenever he visits, insists there should always be seafood, no matter that Olympus is a mountain. And Apollo? He argues the stew looks fine, but could be more harmonious in color. Welcome to the most exhausting dinner party in history. Hestia knows all of this. She takes a deep breath and continues stirring. Her eyes stay calm, but you can almost feel the pressure pressing on her shoulders. Every sibling expects perfection. And perfection, when your kitchen flames are eternal and your critics immortal, is a tall order. Historically, food in Greek society was tied to identity. Grain, wine, and olive oil formed what scholars call the Mediterranean triad. These were staples of both daily life and religious ritual. To offer them to the gods was symbolic. Bread for sustenance, wine for joy, oil for light. But in the myths, gods were never satisfied with simplicity. They demanded variety, luxury, and sometimes absurdity. Like a roasted bull alongside delicate honey cakes. Tonight, Hestia faces the same problem. Do you give them humble nourishment or dazzling extravagance? Zeus clears his throat. You recognize the sound. This is not a thundercloud, but a judgment brewing. Too slow, he mutters. Hera folds her arms. Too much oil, she says, though she hasn't even tasted anything yet. Hestia doesn't flinch. She simply adjusts the pot, letting the fire shift from fierce to steady, as if telling her siblings, patience. Good meals take time. A quirky detail. In some city-states, women were rarely allowed to eat at public banquets. Food was tied to male political identity. Yet Hestia, a goddess, embodies the hearth itself, the most private, domestic space. This paradox fascinates historians. She ruled the home, yet was absent from public feasts. And here she is now, trying to feed the gods who often forgot her. Hermes, of course, cannot resist. He sneaks closer, dips a finger into a sauce, and grins. Needs more garlic, he declares, even though garlic was both loved and hated in Greek culture. Farmers swore by it for strength. City elites thought it too vulgar. Scholars still debate whether garlic was considered sacred or profane. Tonight, Hermes decides it is simply tasty. Artemis contributes next. She bursts into the kitchen, holding a freshly caught deer. Add this, she says, eyes sparkling. Hestia sighs softly. Cooking venison properly takes hours, not minutes. But refusing Artemis is dangerous. She does not take rejection lightly. So Hestia places the meat near the fire, promising to make space for it. Secretly, you wonder whether she has time before Hera complains again. The kitchen grows crowded. Dionysus arrives, already tipsy, carrying 3 amphorae of wine. Every dish needs wine, he announces, pouring half a jug into the stew. The pot hisses like it's singing. Apollo shakes his head. No balance, he mutters, still strumming his lyre. Hera scowls. Zeus sighs. And Hermes steals another role. The scene feels less like a meal and more like theater, each god playing their eternal role. Yet through the chaos, Hestia holds steady. She doesn't shout, doesn't argue. She stirs quietly, adjusts the flame, and adds another handful of herbs. Watching her, you realize the miracle isn't whether the food will taste good. The miracle is that she hasn't walked out yet. The air thickens with aromas. Meat, wine, herbs mingling in the sacred fire. Even the gods fall quiet for a moment. You catch yourself smiling. Maybe, just maybe, this dinner might work after all. The fire flickers, and you realize Hestia is battling her greatest challenge yet. Not flames, not knives, but patience. For all her power, controlling a steady cooking flame is surprisingly difficult. Eternal fire is brilliant for rituals, less so for simmering stew. Too low, it sulks. Too high, it roars. You watch her gently raise a hand, coaxing the blaze like one might soothe a restless child. She murmurs something you cannot catch, and the flames ease, turning from wild sparks into a steady glow. The goddess of the hearth is practicing the oldest skill of cooks everywhere, adjusting the heat. In ancient kitchens, fire management was everything. Archaeologists studying Greek hearths have found blackened stones arranged to cradle pots, proof that cooking was less about recipes and more about mastering the flames. Scholars note that women of the household spent much of their lives tending fires. One mistake meant wasted food, or worse, an angry household. Imagine the pressure multiplied to divine scale. Hestia is, in a way, every Greek woman magnified, struggling to keep the fire perfect. Apollo sighs dramatically. Still not enough brightness, he declares, though he clearly means the broth, not the lighting. Hera comments that the smoke is curling in the wrong direction. Zeus drums his fingers like distant thunder. Hestia ignores them all. She adds a pinch of barley, watching the grains swirl like tiny planets. To her, the challenge is less about taste and more about balance. If she can hold the flame steady, the rest will follow. Here's a curious tidbit. Ancient Greek fire was never struck from scratch in sacred settings. Cities carried torches from Hestia's eternal flame to relight extinguished hearths. Fire was continuity, a chain unbroken. Some historians still debate whether the goddess's flame symbolized political unity or simply religious comfort. Either way, watching her tonight, you see both politics and comfort simmering together. Hermes leans over the pot again. Too slow, he mutters, and tries to dip another piece of bread into the broth. Hestia shoots him a look, not angry, but firm enough to freeze him mid-bite. You almost laugh. Even the trickster knows not to test the hearth goddess twice. Artemis chuckles, whispering that Hermes deserves burnt fingers. Apollo strums a mocking tune. The kitchen feels less like chaos now, more like a stage where everyone plays their part. And at the center, Hestia continues her patient dance with the flame. The broth bubbles at last, steady and controlled. You smell grain, herbs, wine, and smoke blending. The air feels thicker, almost ritualistic. For a moment, even Zeus quiets, inhaling deeply. You think maybe patience is the true divine ingredient. By the time the broth steadies, Hestia pulls out a worn scroll tucked beside the hearth. You blink in surprise. Recipes? Indeed, mortals have long sent her offerings not only of food, but also of instructions. Imagine ancient farmers scribbling down cooking advice for the goddess herself. She unrolls the parchment, scanning notes written in faded ink. Add salt sparingly. Grind herbs fresh. Simmer barley longer. It feels like humanity whispering into Olympus, hoping their humble tricks will help the divine kitchen. Historically, Greeks believed recipes could be gifts. Temples sometimes recorded offerings not just of grain or oil, but instructions on preparation. For example, archaeologists uncovered inscriptions that detail how to bake sacred bread for Demeter, or how to mix wine with honey for Dionysus. Whether Hestia truly read mortal advice is uncertain, but tonight she seems to. Her fingers trace the scroll with curiosity, as though mortals might actually know something useful. Zeus raises an eyebrow. Mortals telling us how to eat? His voice drips with disdain. Hera sighs loudly, already unimpressed. Apollo suggests color-coding the scroll. Hermes chuckles, saying mortals are the only ones who understand seasoning. You smirk. Maybe he's right. Salt and herbs are mortal wisdom, not divine privilege. A quirky fact: in some regions, salt was so precious it was offered in temples as if it were gold. Some scholars even argue the Greek word for salary originates from the value of salt. Though debated, it shows how vital simple seasonings were. Tonight, Hestia sprinkles salt with the reverence of an offering, not just a taste enhancer. She tries one mortal recipe: barley porridge with wine and herbs. The gods glance skeptically at the bubbling mix. Artemis sniffs. Apollo strums. Hermes already angles for a taste. Hestia ignores them, stirring slowly. You realize the act itself is symbolic. Mortals feeding gods, gods tasting mortal patience. Perhaps this is what religion always was: a dialogue at the dinner table. The smell deepens. Grain softens. Wine thickens. Herbs bloom. You feel your stomach grumble, though you are only watching. Even Hera looks intrigued, though she hides it behind a stern expression. Zeus sniffs, but says nothing. And that silence from him feels like approval. The scroll is rolled back, but a new problem rises. Not ingredients, but equipment. You glance around the kitchen of Olympus and realize it's a disaster zone of impractical luxury. Pots are bronze, yes, but half are warped from ages of divine feasts. Ladles are silver, which bend easily under the weight of stew. Plates are gold, which conduct heat far too well, so a spoonful of soup might scorch your lips before you even swallow. Gods may command the skies, but they are terrible at choosing cookware. Hestia sighs softly. She lifts a golden bowl, immediately sets it down again, and instead reaches for a plain clay vessel tucked in the corner. You grin. Mortals knew the secret long ago. Clay cools, bronze holds, gold just looks good. A simple pot may save the day where divine glitter fails. Historically, Greek households often used terracotta for daily cooking. Clay absorbed heat slowly, keeping food warm but not scalding. Bronze was common too, but expensive. Gold or silver dishes, though, were mostly ceremonial, for display rather than real meals. Some scholars still debate whether Homer's lavish banquet scenes were literal or exaggerated poetry. Were kings truly eating from solid gold, or was it symbolic? No consensus exists. Tonight, though, you see firsthand. Gold is useless when you just need soup. Hermes notices Hestia's choice. Clay, really? He snickers. Mortals will think we've lost our shine. Hestia ignores him, ladling broth steadily. Artemis mutters that clay feels more honest than gold. Hera rolls her eyes. Zeus pretends not to care, but leans slightly closer. You think practical beats fancy, even on Olympus. A quirky little fact. Archaeologists once discovered clay cookware still containing traces of meals, grains, olive pits, even burnt residue. Studying them revealed actual recipes of common people. One pot in Corinth still held barley porridge residue after 2,000 years. Imagine history's version of leftover takeout. Tonight, Hestia's clay pot feels like a bridge between godly feast and mortal kitchen. As she serves, you see the difference. The broth doesn't steam violently. It settles, gentle, approachable. The gods lean in, suspicious but curious. Even Apollo stops strumming for a second. It is not divine glitter that invites them. It is warmth, steadiness, simplicity. And maybe that is Hestia's lesson. Family is fed not by gold, but by something that doesn't crack under heat. The quiet moment doesn't last. Just as the clay bowls are being filled, a familiar laugh echoes through the kitchen. Dionysus, the god of wine, bursts in, carrying not one, but 3 amphorae balanced on his shoulders. His cheeks are already flushed, his grin wider than the doorway. What is dinner without wine? He declares, splashing purple liquid dangerously close to the fire. A tragedy. Hestia winces, but keeps stirring. She knows Dionysus well. everything with him turns into a festival. If she lets him, the broth will be more wine than stew. Zeus frowns, muttering about moderation. Hera sighs, already predicting a mess. Hermes claps his hands, delighted. Free drinks. Historically, wine was central to Greek culture. Diluted with water, it was the drink of everyday life. Undiluted, it was considered barbaric. Symposia, drinking parties, were where philosophy, politics, and poetry flourished. Dionysus symbolized both joy and danger of wine, the ecstasy and the excess. Scholars still argue whether his myths celebrate liberation or warn against chaos. Tonight, the debate is playing out in Hestia's kitchen. Add it all, Dionysus insists, tipping the first jug. The pot hisses violently. Steam fills the room, carrying a heady sweetness. Apollo wrinkles his nose. Too strong, he says. Artemis glares, muttering that deer meat and wine do not mix. Hermes, however, already dips bread, sighing in pleasure. Quirky fact: archaeologists have found ancient craters, giant mixing bowls for wine, etched with scenes of revelry. Some show men lying sideways, clearly drunk, while servants pour endlessly. These artifacts remind us wine was never just a drink. It was theater, ritual, even philosophy. Back in the kitchen, Hestia steadies the stew. She balances Dionysus's flood with more barley and herbs, calming the sweetness with substance. It is like watching a conductor manage an orchestra of unruly instruments. She doesn't reject Dionysus. She adapts. That is her way. The gods bicker. Zeus says too much wine dulls judgment. Dionysus shouts that judgment is overrated. Hera warns that the kitchen will smell for weeks. Hermes proposes a toast. Apollo strums louder, pretending to orchestrate the chaos. Yet, through it all, Hestia stirs calmly, guiding the mixture back toward harmony. The fragrance changes. Wine, grain, herbs, and meat fuse into something richer, deeper. The kitchen quiets again. For a heartbeat, even Dionysus looks impressed. You breathe in and think, maybe joy and order can share the same pot, if someone patient enough stirs. Just when you think the kitchen might hold steady, Athena walks in. Unlike Dionysus, she doesn't bring chaos. She brings a plan. She carries a wax tablet under her arm, already covered with neat diagrams and battle-like formations. If you want efficiency, she says calmly, we must organize the meal like a campaign. Hestia glances up, half smiling, half weary. Athena kneels by the hearth, sketching zones. Here, the grain, there, the meat. On this side, the herbs. Divide, allocate, execute, she declares. To her, cooking is strategy. Apollo nods approvingly. Zeus grunts. Hermes mutters that dinner shouldn't feel like a military march. Historically, Athena embodied wisdom and warcraft. To her followers, order was sacred. Some temples even had kitchens designed with structured layouts, suggesting that efficiency was a virtue. Scholars still argue whether these arrangements were religious necessity or cultural practicality. Tonight, Athena proves at least one thing. She treats even dinner like a battlefield. She suggests cooking times written on the wall. She drafts a rotation for stirring the pot. Artemis groans, saying hunting is easier than following instructions. Dionysus laughs, calling the whole plan too sober. Hera raises an eyebrow, but doesn't argue, perhaps secretly impressed. Quirky fact: ancient Greeks measured time in unusual ways. Instead of precise minutes, they often relied on water clocks, where dripping water marked the passing of time. Imagine timing stew not by heat, but by how much liquid fills a jar. Some scholars believe even cooking may have been measured this way. Tonight, Athena suggests marking broth levels like a tactical chart. The plan seems ridiculous, but strangely, it helps. The gods stop arguing for a moment, following her order. Hestia smiles faintly. Strategy may not season the stew, but it calms the cooks. You realize, sometimes the hearth needs patience, and sometimes it needs a plan. Order doesn't last long on Olympus. As Athena's diagrams still glow on the wall, Apollo raises his lyre. If the eye eats first, he declares, then music must be the seasoning of the soul. He plucks a bright chord, filling the kitchen with golden notes. The broth bubbles in rhythm, almost dancing with the melody. Hestia sighs. another variable in her stew. Apollo insists on harmony. He claims flavors are like chords. Too much salt is dissonance. Herbs provide melody. Wine brings bass. Balance them, he says, and the meal will sing. You admit it's poetic, but cooking by symphony is hardly practical. Zeus grumbles. Hera mutters that music won't stop garlic from stinking. Hermes hums along, off-key, just to annoy. Historically, Apollo was linked not just to music, but to healing. Ancient physicians sometimes prescribed melodies to calm patients. Some scholars debate whether this was metaphorical or literal. Did Greeks truly believe music altered health? Or was it symbolic? Tonight, Apollo is certain. Music makes food divine. He plays faster. The stew froths higher. Artemis shouts that the deer meat is boiling too quickly. Dionysus claps, shouting for more rhythm. Hestia pinches the bridge of her nose. She steadies the flame, countering Apollo's tempo. The goddess of Hearth and the god of music duel silently, one with fire, one with strings. Quirky fact: some ancient inscriptions suggest cooks sang chants while preparing meals, partly to mark rhythm, partly to bless the food. Whether it improved flavor is unknown. Scholars still argue, but the idea lingers. Perhaps sound shapes taste more than we admit. Finally, Apollo ends on a triumphant chord. The stew settles, though it looks dangerously overexcited. Hestia gives him a look, tolerant but stern. Apollo bows dramatically, claiming the meal now carries harmony. You exhale. In this kitchen, even soup needs a soundtrack. Just as Apollo strums his final chord, Artemis returns, proudly carrying her prize. A freshly hunted deer lies across her shoulders, its fur still gleaming in the firelight. Now this is real food, she declares. Not herbs, not barley, meat that runs wild beneath the moon. She drops it heavily near the hearth, dust scattering across the stone floor. Hestia blinks, measuring the weight of this new challenge. Venison takes hours to roast properly, and the gods are already restless. But Artemis's enthusiasm is infectious, her eyes shining like a huntress who never misses. Refusing would risk offense. Accepting risks chaos. The goddess of the hearth takes a slow breath. then nods. We'll make room. Historically, hunting was both necessity and ritual. In many Greek myths, feasts included sacrificed animals, their meat roasted in honor of gods. Archaeologists have found altars stained with animal bones and ash, evidence of shared meals between mortals and their deities. Yet scholars debate, did gods truly eat, or did smoke alone satisfy them? No clear answer survives. Tonight, however, Artemis demands real meat on the table. She sets her bow aside, already skinning with swift precision. Hermes whistles, impressed. Hera frowns at the mess. Dionysus cheers, declaring that venison pairs perfectly with wine. Apollo rolls his eyes, still strumming. Zeus leans forward, curious. You edge back, wondering how a divine kitchen handles raw deer on top of everything else. Quirky fact: venison was considered both prestigious and impractical in ancient Greece. Most households relied on goats, sheep, or pigs. Deer meat was rare, a hunter's trophy more than a staple. Some scholars argue that references to deer feasts in poetry were symbolic, not common practice. Yet here Artemis insists, rare or not, it belongs. Hestia arranges the meat carefully, placing it near the fire, letting smoke curl around it. She sprinkles herbs, murmurs softly, and turns her ladle back to the stew. She doesn't resist the chaos. She absorbs it. Watching her, you realize the hearth is not about rejecting every demand, but about finding space for all, even when space is crowded. The smell of venison mingles with barley and wine. Strong, earthy, wild. The gods sniff, intrigued. For once, silence settles. Perhaps Artemis's gift will hold them patient. For now, patience doesn't last. As Artemis tends her venison, Hermes sneaks forward again. He moves lightly, faster than the eye. By the time you blink, half a loaf of bread is gone, tucked under his arm. He grins mischievously, crumbs scattering. Logistics, he repeats, as though stealing food is divine supply management. Hestia sighs, but says nothing. She knows Hermes cannot resist. Zeus scowls. Hera narrows her eyes. Apollo groans. Artemis threatens to shoot him with a blunt arrow. Dionysus claps, calling Hermes the true spirit of feasting. You nearly laugh. The god of thieves is also the god of snacks. Historically, Hermes symbolized commerce, travel, and mischief. Offerings to him often included cakes or bread left at crossroads, a way to appease his wandering spirit. Some scholars argue these offerings are practical, feed travelers, and honor the god at once. Others insist they were ritual bribes to keep him from stealing more. Tonight, his habit proves the latter. Quirky fact: archaeologists have uncovered small clay figurines of Hermes near ovens, suggesting bakers sought his favor. Imagine praying to the trickster god to keep him from stealing your loaves. The irony remains delicious. Hermes munches loudly, ignoring Hera's glare. He dips another roll straight into the stew. Hestia fixes him with a calm look, not anger, but quiet authority. She gently takes the ladle from his hand, reclaiming order. "Wait," she says softly. For a heartbeat, even Hermes pauses. You realize this is Hestia's strength. Not thunder like Zeus, not weapons like Artemis, not chaos like Dionysus. Her power is quiet steadiness, the ability to restore balance without shouting. Watching her reclaim the pot from Hermes, you feel the weight of her role. The hearth doesn't blaze, it doesn't hunt, it doesn't steal. It simply endures. The gods grumble, but Hermes sits back, pouting slightly. The bread is half gone, the stew still bubbling. The kitchen regains its rhythm. For now, the feast is saved. The kitchen seems almost calm again, until the fire flares too high. One careless spark leaps from the hearth, racing up the bronze pot. Hestia reacts instantly, lowering her hand to steady it. But for a brief second, the entire kitchen feels like a bonfire. Zeus narrows his eyes, thunder rumbling faintly. "Control your flame," he warns. Hera pulls her robe away from the smoke, muttering about disaster. Dionysus cheers, shouting that it looks like the start of a party. You feel your heartbeat quicken. Eternal fire is no ordinary flame. If it bursts free, Olympus itself might glow like a torch. Hestia, however, doesn't panic. She closes her eyes, whispers words softer than the crackling. Slowly, the blaze bends, shrinking, steadying back into place. The broth bubbles calmly again, as though nothing happened. Historically, fire accidents were feared in Greek cities, with homes built of wood and straw. A stray spark could destroy entire neighborhoods. This is why hearth fires were sacred, yet carefully tended. Some scholars debate whether Hestia's worship was partly a reminder of fire's danger, not just its comfort. Tonight proves the point. Her role is to protect, not just to warm. Hermes coughs dramatically. Apollo strums a nervous chord. Artemis stares at the venison, muttering that it almost scorched. Yet through the tension, Hestia simply adjusts the pot's angle, as if she has been doing this for centuries. And of course, she has. Quirky fact. Archaeologists discovered small bronze fire guards in some ruins, shaped like animals. They were designed to shield kitchens from sparks. Some even had inscriptions invoking Hestia's name. Imagine cooking dinner while whispering a prayer to keep the stew from burning the house down. Tonight, you see that prayer come alive. The gods fall silent. For once, even Zeus says nothing. The air smells smoky, but the danger passes. You exhale, realizing how fragile even Olympus can feel when fire leaps beyond its boundaries, and how strong Hestia is, holding the balance in her steady hands. The moment passes, but the test is not over. At last, Hestia begins to serve the stew. Clay bowls are set in a circle, steam rising gently. The gods lean closer, expressions ranging from suspicion to hunger. The first spoonful lands in Zeus's bowl. He sniffs. Hera watches. Hermes smirks. The room holds its breath. Zeus takes a bite. Chews. For a heartbeat, silence reigns. Then he doesn't speak. He simply lifts his eyebrows. Hera tilts her head. Apollo plucks a questioning note. You realize what just happened. The ruler of the skies is searching for polite words. The others follow. Hera sips, frowning slightly. Artemis tastes venison, nodding once. Hermes gulps noisily, declaring it not bad. Dionysus raises his bowl like a toast, shouting that it pairs perfectly with wine. Apollo mutters something about improved harmony. Slowly, the air relaxes. No one spits it out. No one storms away. In Olympus, that counts as success. Historically, Greek banquets were as much about performance as flavor. Scholars point out that eating together displayed unity, even if the food was simple. The act of sharing is symbolic. Yet, ancient writers loved to exaggerate reactions. Heroes who devoured whole oxen, or guests who fainted from flavor. Was it metaphor or fact? Historians still argue. Tonight, the truth leans toward comedy, God's politely negotiating taste. Quirky fact. In some myths, ambrosia itself was said to taste different to each god, sweet to one, savory to another, indescribable to mortals. Imagine a food that shifts with your desire. Perhaps that's why no one can quite agree on Hestia's stew. They expect ambrosia, but receive barley and venison. Hestia doesn't boast. She simply ladles more, calm as ever. Watching her, you see that victory isn't Zeus praising aloud. It's this: a room full of gods eating together without argument. For a goddess of the hearth, that is triumph enough. The bowls are half empty when Hestia reaches for a small bundle near the hearth. She unties it, revealing a handful of green sprigs, an herb you don't recognize at first. It smells sharp, almost magical. Hermes leans in, sniffing. "What is that?" he asks. Hestia answers quietly. "A gift from mortals." You blink. Mortals gave herbs to Olympus? Indeed. Ancient farmers sometimes offered plants not only as food, but as charms. This particular sprig, rue perhaps, or pennyroyal, was believed to ward off evil. Some even tucked it into belts or hung it above doors. Tonight, it finds its way into the divine stew. Artemis frowns. That's medicine, not spice. Apollo tilts his head, intrigued since herbs often blurred the line between healing and flavor. Hera raises an eyebrow, but says nothing. Zeus grunts. Dionysus sniffs loudly, declaring it smells like something poured into wine. You laugh softly. Gods are no less picky than mortals. Historically, Greek cooking relied heavily on herbs. Mint, oregano, thyme, fennel, all were common. But some herbs carried reputations beyond taste. Scholars still debate whether their use in offerings was culinary or magical. Did people season for flavor or invoke protection? No one fully agrees. Tonight, Hestia treats it as both. She crushes the sprigs gently, letting the aroma spread. The stew shifts, scent growing sharper, cleaner. The gods sniff, puzzled but intrigued. Apollo claims he feels clearer already. Hermes coughs theatrically. Dionysus asks if it mixes well with wine. Hera finally mutters, "At least it smells less oily." Quirky fact: archaeologists discovered herb remains preserved in ancient amphorae, still faintly aromatic after millennia. Imagine opening a jar buried for 2,000 years and smelling thyme. A whisper from history's kitchen. Tonight, the whisper is strong in Hestia's pot. The taste changes subtly. Not ambrosia, not nectar, something earthier, sharper, closer to the world of mortals. Watching the gods sip cautiously, you realize this. Sometimes, the most powerful ingredient isn't divine at all. It's the gift of ordinary hands, passed upward to Olympus. The stew simmers with mortal herbs, but questions linger in the air. Hermes slouches back. "Do we even need this?" he asks, waving a half-eaten roll. "Ambrosia and nectar are enough." Zeus grunts in agreement. Apollo shrugs. Hera narrows her eyes. The room feels split, half intrigued, half doubtful. Scholars, too, have argued for centuries. Did the gods actually consume food? Some sources insist they survived solely on ambrosia, described as sweet, glowing, almost otherworldly. Others suggest feasts were necessary to establish hierarchy. Who sat where? Who was served first? Who could complain? Was food divine fuel or divine politics? Historians remain divided. Hestia says nothing. She continues stirring, calm as always. Her silence feels louder than Zeus's grumble. Perhaps the answer doesn't matter. Perhaps what matters is that the gods sit together, bowls in hand, steam rising between them. Quirky fact: some myths describe ambrosia as shape-shifting, tasting different to each deity. Sweet for Aphrodite, fiery for Ares, cooling for Poseidon. If that were true, then feasts were not about flavor, but perception. Maybe that's why Zeus never fully approves. He expects thunder, not barley. The gods debate. Dionysus insists wine alone sustains the soul. Artemis argues meat proves strength. Apollo says harmony is the only measure. Hermes just wants more bread. Hera sighs, muttering that the kitchen is too smoky. Zeus drums the table, thunder in miniature. Through it all, Hestia stirs. Quiet, steady. She doesn't claim her food replaces ambrosia. She doesn't argue about politics. She simply keeps the fire alive, making sure bowls remain filled. Watching her, you realize the question of need misses the point. The hearth is not about necessity. It's about presence. The debate fades as mouths fill again. For a few minutes, Olympus forgets to argue. Steam rises, fire glows, and even Zeus relaxes. Perhaps scholars will never resolve whether gods needed food. But here, tonight, it hardly matters. The bowls empty again, and Hermes quickly complains. We should have dessert. The gods stare at him. Dessert? On Olympus? Yet the idea lingers. Apollo strums a note, as if to underline it. Dionysus smirks. Hera sighs. Zeus frowns, but doesn't dismiss it. In truth, ancient Greek meals rarely ended with sweets. Honey was the primary sweetener, drizzled on fruits, nuts, or cakes made of barley. Sometimes cheese was added. No refined sugar existed, no frosted confections. Yet honey was enough, called nectar of the bees. Some believed it held divine power. Bees themselves were seen as sacred, tiny messengers between worlds. So Hermes' suggestion isn't absurd. Hestia rises, retrieves a clay dish, and pours warm honey over figs and walnuts. The golden syrup glistens in the firelight. The gods lean closer. Even Zeus leans closer. Quirky fact. In some myths, honey was used to preserve bodies, slowing decay. In others, it was offered to the dead, guiding souls. Honey meant more than sweetness. It meant continuity, memory, immortality. Tonight, though, it simply means dessert. The gods sample cautiously. Dionysus exclaims first, declaring it pairs perfectly with wine. Hermes steals a second fig. Apollo praises its harmony. Artemis mutters, "It's sticky." Hera closes her eyes, enjoying quietly. Zeus nods once, as if approving. The taste lingers, warm and glowing, sweeter than barley, sharper than herbs. You taste it too, imagining the same flavors shared by mortals thousands of years ago, by candlelight or under stars. For a moment, Olympus and Earth are not so far apart. Perhaps that's the secret. Dessert is not indulgence, but reminder. A taste that connects worlds. The gods chew in silence, golden honey on their lips. The feast winds down, but the fire remains bright. Hestia clears bowls with quiet care. The gods lounge, satisfied yet restless. Hermes taps his foot. Artemis sharpens an arrow. Dionysus hums. Zeus stretches like a storm cloud. Then Hera speaks. Food is more than fuel. It is order. The others pause. She explains. Who eats first? Who waits? Who serves? These rules bind us. Her words cut sharp. Perhaps food has always been about power as much as flavor. Historians agree. In Greek banquets, seating order reflected status. Reclining couches marked hierarchy. Wine bowls circulated in strict order. To break the sequence was insult. A meal was never just eating. It was theater, a stage for rank and rivalry. Quirky fact, some symposia had mixers, officials who diluted wine with water. Their role wasn't culinary. It was political, enforcing moderation and control. Imagine being remembered not for taste, but for authority over bowls. On Olympus, the same tension simmers. Zeus claims the head of the table by right. Hera asserts dignity as queen. Apollo speaks for balance. Dionysus pushes for freedom. Hermes jokes about skipping lines. Even the act of chewing can become symbolic. Hestia interrupts softly. The fire does not choose. It warms all. Her voice stills the room. For a heartbeat, hierarchy fades. They are simply diners, hands sticky with honey, bellies full of barley and herbs. Maybe that's the truth. food holds two faces. It is order, marking place and power. But it is also equality, pulling even gods back to the same hunger, the same satisfaction. Tonight, you see both truths flicker in the firelight. The gods fall quiet, bowls empty, eyes thoughtful. The feast ends not with thunder, but with silence. The hall grows cooler. Shadows lengthen. The gods lean back, satisfied, as if sinking into the night itself. Yet conversation lingers, like embers after flame. Poseidon clears his throat. He has been quiet, but now he speaks. The sea has its own feasts. Fish rise, salt spreads, storms churn the table. His voice is tidal, rolling and deep. He describes dolphins leaping, nets heavy with silver scales, salt air sharp as wine. Ancient Greeks relied heavily on the sea. Fish was staple, preserved with salt, grilled over coals, stewed in clay pots. Salt itself was wealth, traded like currency. To earn your salt meant value. Whole economies floated on brine. Quirky fact, the word salary comes from sal, Latin for salt. Soldiers were sometimes paid in it. Imagine wages you could eat. The gods listen. Dionysus laughs, declaring wine and salt are brothers. One ferments, one preserves. Apollo muses that fish bones sing their own harmony. Hermes jokes about seashells as currency. Hera remarks that salt stings wounds, but also heals. You taste it too, imagining salted anchovies, grilled sea bream, brine on lips, firelight gleaming on scales. Simple, sharp, enduring. Perhaps Poseidon's point is this: Futh's landscape. Mountains give barley, fields give herbs, seas give fish. To eat is to consume place itself. Every bite binds you to soil or wave. Tonight, Olympus eats not only barley and honey, but earth and sea. The gods nod. The hall smells faintly of brine, though no fish was cooked. Memory itself has seasoned the air. The night grows late. Stars glitter through the high windows. The gods sit quieter now. The fire a low glow. Conversation turns reflective, almost mortal. Athena speaks at last. Wisdom, she says, lies not in eating, but in remembering what is eaten. She recalls olives pressed into oil, their bitterness mellowed with time. She recalls barley ground to flour, feeding soldiers and scholars alike. Food, she argues, is archive, a record you chew, swallow, carry within. Quirky fact: archaeologists study ancient trash pits, heaps of shells, bones, seeds, to reconstruct diets. Refuse becomes memory. The humblest scrap tells stories grander than marble. The gods listen. Apollo agrees, strumming softly. Each bite is a note, memory a song. Hera notes that banquets outlive wars, their rules shaping generations. Hermes jokes that he remembers meals better than laws. Athena smirks. That explains much. You reflect, too. Each bite you've taken tonight, imagined barley, honey, herbs, lingers not in stomach, but in thought. The flavor is memory, lasting longer than fullness. Perhaps that's Athena's truth. Food is wisdom because it endures. Not the act of chewing, but the stories it leaves. A fish bone in soil, an olive pit in ash, a honey stain on clay. To eat is to write history with teeth. The gods grow quiet. Their bowls are gone, but the memory remains. Even gods, it seems, measure time in meals. The fire flickers. Outside, the wind stirs. The feast is nearly done. The hall grows hushed, as though even gods grow full. Only embers glow. Only the wind sighs. Hestia, goddess of the hearth, speaks softly. Fire is the first feast. Without it, no bread, no honey cakes, no wine warmed, no fish grilled. Fire is table's mother. The gods nod. They know it true. Without Hestia's hearth, Olympus itself is only cold stone. Fire turns grain to bread, turns grape to nectar, turns night to comfort. Quirky fact: the word focus comes from Latin for hearth. To focus was to gather around flame. Today, your focus may be screen or book. Long ago, it was embers. You imagine this: a family seated by hearth, barley bread steaming, stew bubbling, stories circling with smoke. Fire was memory's anchor. Without it, no feasts, no myths, no laughter echoing long into night. Dionysus raises his cup in toast to fire and all it feeds. Apollo strums bright chords. Hera whispers blessings. Hermes jokes that without fire, mortals would eat raw turnips forever. Even Zeus, mighty, lifts his hand in salute. The hall glows warmer, though no logs are added. Perhaps fire lives not only in wood, but in memory, in gathering, in the telling of tales. You feel it too. The crackle of flame is rhythm. The glow is heart. You sit among gods, but you are only human. And yet the hearth binds both. The night deepens. The gods fade like sparks into smoke. Still, the hearth burns on. The feast is done. Silence settles like a soft cloak. Yet one figure rises. Zeus, cloud gatherer, his voice low but steady. Mortals believe we feast for ourselves, he says. But feasts are mirrors. Mortals see in us what they do each day. They bake, they drink, they gather, they give thanks. In their firelight, they glimpse Olympus. The gods listen, grave. Zeus continues, to eat is to honor life. Bread, honey, wine, salt, fire. Mortals and gods. They remind both that existence is shared. Quirky fact. In many ancient cultures, to eat with someone was sacred contract. Breaking bread meant peace. Sharing salt meant loyalty. Refusing food was insult. Meals were treaties written in crumbs. Athena adds, wisdom is not only to fight, but to sit at table. Dionysus swirls his cup. Wine is not only escape, but communion. Hestia murmurs, Hearth is not only heat, but heart. You see it now. The gods' feast was never about abundance. It was about connection, about remembering soil and sea, fire and wind, memory and myth, about eating together across divine and mortal. Zeus raises his hand. Let mortals remember this. Every meal is Olympus in miniature. Every loaf, every cup, every flame is sacred. The gods rise. The hall dissolves into starlight. You are left alone, yet not lonely, for you carry their feast within you. The last ember fades. Night embraces you. The story closes, not with thunder, but with quiet warmth. So here, at the quiet's edge, the gods' feast dissolves into dream. The clatter of bowls is gone, but its echo lingers. Bread, honey, fire, memory. You lie back, listening to your own breath as if it were tide. Sleep gathers like gentle fog. Tomorrow will bring new meals, new stories. But tonight, you carry Olympus at your table. Every bite, every flame, every silence holds something sacred. Rest now. The gods have eaten, and so have you.